One of the things that I want to start out by saying is that we have, this church, St. Martin's, your clergy and your staff have been working rather feverishly to keep up with all of the changes that have happened in the world this week. And I'm sure that you all have been frantically trying to keep up with all the changes that have happened in the world this week as well. And there's one word that came back again and again to me this past week, and I saw it this morning on the front page of the New York Times as I was having breakfast this morning, kind of looking through the paper, that has kind of stuck with me this week. And it comes here, we hear it in our gospel reading this morning, although the word is not ever said, but that word is vulnerability. And vulnerability, we have vulnerable populations of people. We heard from the various folks, like the CDC folks and other folks from health services and agencies around the country, that our health system is vulnerable because we weren't as prepared as we could have been or should have been. I guess that's what you get for cutting public funds for things like public health for 25 years in a row, is you get something that's maybe left a little bit more vulnerable to something like this attack that the virus has done here in our country. It strikes me also, so there's that side of vulnerable, which is like the side of the world. It also strikes me that we have vulnerability is kind of a weakness in that way. How the world sees the word vulnerability is in a weakness. That it's something that's not quite as, or not as strong as, or where you are vulnerable to attack, right? But every time I think about how the world sees things, I think that God uses that same thing and turns it and makes it the opposite. And that's our God is the God of opposites. Someone much more famous than I said that. Our God takes the vulnerability of the cross and turns it into resurrected new life. Our God is the God of vulnerability. Think about this. God became so vulnerable that God said, you know what I'm going to do? Let's make a creation. That'll be a good idea. And let's put things in it. And let's let them do stuff. And that'll be great. And then we ran amok. And then we have Jesus. God says, I'm going to go down there. I'm going to make myself vulnerable. I am God of the universe and of infinitude and all this other stuff. I'm going to go down there and be with them. I'm going to be vulnerable to them. And God came and walked among us. In our gospel passage this morning, it strikes me that Jesus has a moment of his own personal vulnerability. He's thirsty, and he asks of this woman, the Samaritan woman, give me something to drink. He, in that very moment, says, I am lacking. I am vulnerable to thirst. And she's kind of confused by all this, but then she enters into a conversation with him, and she asks him questions, and she reveals things about herself and her curiosity about her faith, and who is this man, and what is this all about? And she opens up to him, but Jesus had taken the first step of vulnerability and even said, I have thirst. Every time we open ourselves up and are vulnerable to someone else, it is an invitation to greater conversation, and in the end, it's an invitation for relationship. Now again, on the face of it, you might not think that that's exactly true. Maybe, Matthew, stop trying to be the God of opposites on us. But it is true. Every time you open yourself up and are vulnerable to somebody, how are you doing today? I'm great. Everything's fine. I'm lying through my teeth. Everything's horrible. We're saying to somebody, I'm really scared about what's going on with this virus. It seems like it's out of control, and I'm afraid. You've just opened yourself up to both being vulnerable, but also opened yourself up to the other person and an opportunity for deeper relationship, for deeper conversation, for truer faith, truer relationship. When I think about it, the very act of loving someone is being vulnerable. You cannot be any more vulnerable than being truly in love with someone, because you open yourself up to them in ways you wouldn't open yourself up to anybody else in the whole world, and you hope it's going to be okay. My brothers and sisters, this is a strange time we are in. I have felt very strangely about how this is all going to turn out. I said to somebody, it's going to be okay, and the person in a moment of vulnerability looked back at me, looked me in the eye and said, Matthew, you don't know that to be true. And she was right. I don't know that to be true. But what I do know is that I have faith in God, that God will take care of us as God has taken care of us since the beginning of moments of creation. What I do know is that when we close ourselves off to relationship, when we close ourselves off to people, to relationship, to conversation, to being real with one another, that's when things start to get really scary. This week, we will continue to host Winter Shelter. We have done all the things that we need to do and are in compliance with all of the state and federal codes and everything else. And so we know that there is very little risk with either the men or for us coming to serve them. We'll keep, social distancing will be a thing that we're going to do. But Winter Shelter will come and make community happen. We will invite 25 people to come, 25 men to come to our campus, and we'll provide for them for the week. I invite you, if you have a moment in the evenings, to come to Winter Shelter and to be in community. Even if you have to be at least 6 feet apart, that's fine. You can still be in community. One of the things that's weird about preaching to you right now is that I feel a lack of community because I'm used to looking around and seeing all your faces. I know where everybody sits, on which side of church, and no one's here to except me and Nathan, and I got a couple people here who are helping to make sure we push the button right to help start and stop the recording. But come in to Winter Shelter and come and be present, if you can be, to those folks and to one another. Check in on your neighbors. Call folks who are older and see if they need anything. If you can go and even do an errand to go to the store and help to pick up something for them, that would be a gift and a godsend. Now is a time for us to be a little bit vulnerable and say that we do need the help, like Jesus said he was thirsty and did need some water. Now is a time that if we do need things, we should rely on our community to help us. So those who can should reach out, and those who have not, or those who need the help, should be okay to say, yes, I do need some help. Being vulnerable to one another that way means that we can help lift our entire community up together. Now, you're going to notice there's something that we've done, and if you don't have a Book of Common Prayer in your house and would like one, there's a box of them on the portico, the front steps of the church. It's in a box that says, need a Book of Common Prayer? Here, have one. Stop by the church this week. Pick one up, and we can pray together. We can build community and keep community that way as we pray together. Morning prayer, evening prayer, even noonday prayer are all forms in the Book of Common Prayer, and I want you to have a Book of Common Prayer so you can follow along as we do that. And know that when we do that, my brothers and sisters, we'll be joining millions of people around the world who are still praying, who are still being connected through prayer and through faith as we all get through this pandemic together. Finally, I would ask us to remember that we can be vulnerable to one another, and that in that vulnerability we can be the face of God for someone, because we can model that vulnerability, but we can also model that faith, and that faith that says that we believe in God. We know that we are God's. We know that God will provide us with that living water when the rest of the world is a place of barren, dry, and thirst, that God can give us what we need, and that thirst will be slaked forever. So my brothers and sisters, with joyful hearts, let us be vulnerable to one another. Let us reveal our faith in the world and our love